Okay, well, it's 6 p.m. and this is a voluntary session. So nobody really has to be here. I hope that some of you will join, certainly from time to time during the short semester. I think Andy is joining us now. So let's see who joins us over the next several minutes. Andy, nothing better to do on a Friday, huh?
Nah, I just had a few questions, so I figured now would be the best time to ask them.
Sure.
Yeah. Should I just like go ahead and start asking them, or should we?
Yeah, because I don't know if these are voluntary, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a time that some might find helpful, and but doesn't look like Friday at 6 is going to be it. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else is going to join us. So by all means, go for it.
All right. Yeah. I just because I was looking around in the syllabus and stuff, but I was just a little confused about like the assignments and stuff.
All right, let me pull the syllabus up. Just bear with me for a minute, and I will share that. Can you see the syllabus on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so real easy stuff. They're basically a few things that we're going to do, and let me just get past all the baloney and stuff like this. So it's a short course, and basically when you're looking at this whole mess over here, kind of the schedule, uh, there are about three areas that we're really going to concentrate on. And so when you see things over here, you'll notice that here in very bold letters, it says due. And really about the only thing up front that's due is that last page of the syllabus, which I'll get down. Well, let me just show you. You get down to the very end and you see this thing here,
Yeah. Yeah.
the pretest. Yeah, just basically as you can do the pretest and email it back to me. So when it says due, second week, well, this thing is only what, about 5 weeks long. So
Yeah.
when you get to it over the weekend, when you have absolutely nothing else, you can't even bring yourself to open a beer, well, then do this thing, send it back, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
There are some things that I'll put up from time to time, some things on the discussion board. I would, again, it's your call, but given the short nature of the summer one semester, I would try and opt out of the book. I think you have till May 31st to do that, because I would not want to, pay the money for the book.
Yeah.
Everything that we need will be things that I can put up. Now,
All right.
having said that, these are the areas that we're going to work in. So one of them is this idea of forecasting. All right. And when you go to the forecasting PowerPoint slides, you're going to see 3-period moving average, 5-period moving average, 3-period weighted moving average, exponential smoothing, adjusted exponential smoothing. Then
Yeah.
there's a bit of a break, and we have linear trend line, which in essence is linear regression. So if you had statistics and everything, you already know that stuff. But that's my purpose in doing these voluntary Zooms. As you start to go through this, if you're a little confused or others are a little confused, that's my reason for wanting to voluntarily meet,
Yeah.
as we can, just to clear that stuff up and make sure everybody understands. So we go down a little further. Now, the ultimate goal, the ultimate deliverable for this course is a final project. And I'm calling it Betty's Bats. I've been using it for a while, and I'll give you a little information on that tonight and a little bit, as we go forward, some written announcements and so forth. But basically, and I'm still, excuse me, I ended up with a bit of, I don't know if it's the flu or what the hell's going around these days, but so I'm on the mend and I'm still coughing a little bit. But anyway, so what we're going to do as our final deliverable is kind of like a contrived production project to make baseball bats, where we're going to use some of the project management skills, the forecasting stuff, and things like this. So it says here,
All right.
bold letters, watch. Okay, so that's basically suggesting that you go to YouTube, and there are all kinds. It doesn't matter to me which one you watch, but there are all kinds of videos on how to make an aluminum baseball bat. And so if you Google making an aluminum baseball bat on YouTube, you'll come up with a couple of different ones. Just watch one of them. So in other words, you get a sense of what the process might be. Now, there are a dozen different ways to do it, and we're not an engineering school, so we're not really going to make, an aluminum baseball bat. But just
Yeah.
so you have a rough idea of how this stuff happens. Okay, then it says quiz 1, forecasting preparation. And so there will be a couple of quizzes. Now, I don't ambush anybody. What I do is I post a quiz. I'll put it up in contents at some point in time, and you'll have, the weekend plus a couple of days to just, fill it out and send it back. So, it's I guess the phrase used to be take home. So you
Yeah.
take home, use the book, use the PowerPoints, use whatever the hell you want to use. What do I care? It's
Yeah.
not, the idea that I'm trying to trip anybody up. So yes, they're graded in the sense that I do it as a pass fail pretty much. But it's the idea that, okay, so to do this quiz, you had to at least look at some of this PowerPoint nonsense and everything once. So
Yeah.
that's
Some
my
of the
way of
material.
saying, yeah. So so that's all that is. So quiz 1, forecasting. So once we get through and we spend a little bit of time on this stuff, then I'm going to put up a quiz, and usually I'll try and put it up like on a Friday or something, and then by Monday or Tuesday I hope to have it back. I mean, I don't really give due dates in my classes because
Yeah.
those are arbitrary numbers. So when is it due? Well, all right, the honest answer is it's due at the end of the semester. When I sit there and go through the grades, I better see something for each of these categories. That's all it is. So, I
Yeah.
mean, if it takes you a week, it takes you a week, it takes you 4 days, whatever it is, it is. I don't care so much about that. Second area, so that's this idea of topic number 1. Topic 1 is forecasting and a general introduction to Betty's bats.
Yeah, yeah, hold
Then
on.
we,
Like, sorry,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No,
But
it's all right.
right there, like for example, like after the pre-test from syllabus, like OM chapter 1, OM chapter 2, is that also in the
That
forecasting
stuff,
PowerPoint?
well, that's stuff in the textbook and everything like this. But like I say,
Mm,
I mean, topically, we're going to touch on some of that, but it's nothing other than this, forecasting piece, which we will
all right.
aggressively look at. This is other stuff that's a little bit tangential. And what I may do is throw up an occasional PowerPoint that talks about what operations management is about. And typically what I might do is on some given Friday, or if we don't meet on a Friday, maybe we end up meeting, because I'm also going to try and, record these meetings so that
Yeah.
I can put up a PowerPoint and talk about generally the scope of operations management, project management, production management. So, that's just more informational and not going to be quizzed on it. It doesn't directly play into the final product or anything like that, or
Yeah.
final
Yeah.
project, I should say. But it's just information that I'd like you to have, I don't know, in case you're ever on Jeopardy, or
Mm,
something like that.
yeah. Yeah.
So there's nothing really you need to do there. It's just topically saying that, look, this is stuff that I hope to be able to cover. If you were to hang on to, the textbook or keep the book, you'll find it in these different chapters, but nothing that you really have to do. There's nothing that says do for any of that stuff, or write or quiz or, anything like that. All the real like do kind of stuff is bold letters. So
Yeah.
pre-test, do the second week, watch this video. At the end of the second week, which is not, this week, but probably the end of next week, we'll probably put up this forecasting quiz. And if it's not the end of next week, it'll be shortly thereafter. Then
Yeah.
the second area is this project management piece. And there are two things to project management that the book and the PowerPoints talk about. And they talk about this PERT CPM. Well, this is project evaluation review technique, or program evaluation review technique, slant CPM, critical path method. Well, if you do any of the reading on this stuff or Google this stuff, you'll find that PERT is really kind of a military tool that was developed for projects and so forth. And that critical path is more of a civilian version. So we use critical path. And then it says, okay, so project control and scheduling, the example, and this comes out of the PowerPoints, is Frank's, is a, textbook example, but it's called Frank's Fine Floats. So the end of the third week will probably, and it probably won't turn out to be that, it'll probably be the third or fourth week. But again, we got to be careful because we only have about 5 weeks. But the second major area is this critical path stuff, and there will be a quiz on that. And again, it's all take home. And basically what you're doing, you're replicating this thing called Frank's Fine Floats, only what the textbook example, which is in the PowerPoints, this Frank's Fine Floats thing, what it does is a little more, slightly more complicated than something else you might do. And what I'm asking everyone to do is take Frank's Fine Floats, and there's about 10 slides in the, the deck there, the PowerPoint deck. Take Frank's Fine Floats and replicate that with something you're familiar with. So where Frank's Fine Floats, it's a production sheet and all this, baloney about, they make these floats. And so this has to happen and that has to happen and all this nonsense. What I'm saying is pick something you're used to, changing a tire. So what would be the process for that? Baking a cake or cupcakes or cookies or some damn thing, et cetera. In other words, take what you see there and try and do the same thing with something you're familiar with. So, and again, this is not for turning, this thing over here. This is just, the kind of stuff you would put together to do for your understanding. The only turn in is this second quiz. Now, what I probably will have everybody, what I'm going to have everybody do, usually I keep everybody on a little bit of an edge so they make sure they read it and stuff. But realistically, what your quiz is going to be doing Frank's Fine Floats, only either changing a tire, baking a cake, doing something simple. That's the quiz. So you'll do it at home. I'll give you an instruction. Well, remember Frank's Fine Floats? Well, do this, bake a cake, do something like that. And so you'll outline the process. And I know that right now that means nothing to you because we haven't looked at the PowerPoints or anything. So you're saying, well, what does that mean? So you'll understand a little bit more as we go into that. After that, it's the idea of Microsoft Solver. If you have Excel, which, again, was a prereq I put in the syllabus, you got to be able to at least use the minimums of Excel. Excel comes with an add-in, it's called Solver. It's a Solver add-in. So what you have to do is, and just go up to the, the information box at the top where you ask questions or whatever, and just put in, how do I put in, how do I activate the Solver add-in? And it'll tell you, go to the home page or go to file and then go down to the bottom. And, and each version of Excel is slightly different, which is why, you just got to play with it a little bit. But all you're doing is you're turning on, you're clicking the checkbox when you get to it for this Solver add-in, because you'll need that for the third part of what we do, which is this optimization piece. And so we're calling that, using Solver, Microsoft Solver, the add-in, as a tool. And there are going to be 3 Excel examples that we use. One is called HydroSpa, one is called New World Electro. Doesn't mean anything to you today, but it will in a couple of weeks when we start to play with it. And so we're going to learn how to use Solver using those 2 examples. And those are the Excel things, the Excel files that I have in contents. And, you'll step through, and in one of these sessions, I would like to be able to show everybody how to do it. So I'm going, again, to record this. So those that, can't, show up or something, hopefully I'll be able to tell them where to go to find this, this Zoom file, and you can, play back all this nonsense, So that's the other thing. So then we do the optimization piece. Then we start to talk about this Betty's Bats, which I have in the content section listed as a production sheet, and it will mean nothing to you today, so I'm not really going to even step through that. But what it does, and then we after we look that over, we say, okay, so the last piece is this optimization piece, and we will talk about an example using this Microsoft Solver called Tropic Sun. And, I'll put it up there at the time, and eventually I'll put the solution up and everything. And then all we're doing is we're applying 3 things to this project. we're taking the forecasting piece. So we're going to forecast something. We're taking the Frank's fine floats. So we're going to create this critical path of activities that have to be done to make this baseball bat in this project we call Betty's Bats. And then the last thing is the optimization piece, which is kind of like, okay, now that we've made all these bats, what do we do with it? And what's the optimum way to be able to transport it and, inventory it and all of that. And then if we should have any time, which we almost never do, then we'll talk a little bit about tolerances and error, but that is not included in your final project. So Betty's Bats is a project that is, and let me stop share. I don't know if I can get to Betty's Bats. Give me a second here. Let me just see. That's content. Let me see if I can get to this. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. All right, if we go to content, yeah. So this is what's in content. So the syllabus, the forecasting PowerPoint, which is the first thing you're going to play with, this PERT CPM PowerPoint, which is the Frank's fine floats and stuff. These are the new SPA, New World Electro, and Tropic Sun, the examples. But these are basically the three areas that go into Tropic Sun, and I see I have not yet put up the production sheet. So that's all that Betty's Bats is. So you really have no deliverables. You have, that pre-test. You have 2 quizzes, which are take-home quizzes, and basically they're just talking about the PowerPoints. Let me hit the okay, give me just a second here. Okay, because I'm done sharing. All right. And yeah, okay. And there you go. Okay. Anyway, so that's really all we're doing. It's very short semester, 3 areas: forecasting, critical path, optimization. The final project I'm calling Betty's Bats, which will make a little more sense as we start to step through this. That's it. So you don't have homework assignments really. You don't have, read all these chapters and do all these quizzes. You have a forecasting quiz. You have a critical path quiz, just so I can see that you know how to do this stuff. Then we have that optimization thing, which is the, new SPA Electro or World Electro, those 3 things that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And then you plug it all together in Betty's Bats, and that's it. And it's all take home. And so what can I answer for you?
Oh no, you explained everything fine. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
The main confusion was the fact that there was barely any due dates, and I didn't know which were assignments
Yeah.
and which were the reading. That's what
Nah,
confused
see,
me most.
yeah, no, I don't do due dates, because if you think about it, and look, don't forget, I sat where you sit, and I used to hate the professors because, we all work, we all have other stuff that we do. And I used to
Yeah.
absolutely hate the professors that would sit back and say, okay, and this is due next Thursday by 6 p.m. If it's not by 6 p.m., don't send it to me. And I'm thinking to myself, what an asshole. I mean, and I'm thinking to myself, why are you really going to sit up at 6 p.m. and start grading all this? No, the guy would never look at this thing for another 2 weeks. So I'm thinking to myself, why are you torturing me when you don't really even need this? So a long time ago, and I've been teaching now since 1999. And I just don't do that stuff. I don't create artificial due dates, because that's all nonsense. The honest to God due date, because I do need a few things to grade. I got to be able to judge and grade on something.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things that, so you do a couple of quizzes and you have a final project. But the due date's the end of the semester. That's the honest answer. So that's just my way of doing it. What can I say? Not everybody does it my way. So I want this to
No,
be,
yeah.
it's just low pressure. I don't want to create artificial pressure, because between COVID and all the other nonsense we deal with, nobody needs any extra pressure. I'm too old for that stuff. So. All right. So anything else, Andy? Or are you pretty good with that?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Email me anytime.
Yep.
If we need a private Zoom, I'm always happy to do that. You ever get confused about something, just reach out. We set up a private Zoom. We'll go through it. So just stay in touch and let me know.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll do.
You bet. Enjoy your Friday.
Thank you. You as
You
well.
bet. Bye. Okay, so again, Andy joined us. I don't think anybody else is likely to, so I just want to step through forecasting a little bit. And it's the idea of forecasting. We understand that what we're trying to do is, in a way, predict the future. And we know we can't do that. Nobody's got a crystal ball that good, but especially when it comes to demand behaviors and trying to forecast demand, whether it's for a sales organization or how many of these will we need, how many time slots will we, whatever it happens to be, we do try and use different techniques to come up with an answer. So think about it this way: if we are a business entity and we make, I don't know, whatever it is we make, and we know at the end of every month how much business we did that month. We know what that number is. Come, let's say, January 31st. Well, how do we do business wise this month? Oh, well, we sold, I don't know, 37 cars, or we built 400 bicycles, or whatever that number is. At the end of the period, we know the actual result, what the actual demand was, the actual demand numbers. But in business, like anything else, we've probably got to order materials or schedule time or do, in the case of services versus goods, things like that. So we have to kind of look forward and kind of, in quotes, anticipate what may happen the following month. So we always ask the question, okay, well, we did X, Y, Z, or whatever the amount in January. What do we think we're going to do in February? Well, of course, February 28th, or leap year the 29th, but February 28th, we'll know what we've done for February. But right now we're sitting at January 31st and we're saying, geez, how much of stuff do I order? How many of these do I, you get the idea. And so what we're trying to do is crystal ball gaze or predict or forecast what may happen in February. And, again, there are different tools. There are qualitative tools, there are quantitative tools, and you can read all the stuff in different textbooks about what that is. But basically, we're trying to forecast what's going to happen for all kinds of purposes. Typically in business, we used to do short-term planning, medium-range planning, long-term planning. Well, today with technology and everything else, realistically, and it used to be that short term was anything up to a year, and medium term was up to 2 or 3 years, and long term was anything. Well, that's not the way it is today. Today, I mean, really, we look at things and we say, okay, short term is like this week, this month, possibly this year. And then there's long term. Anything over that is really considered long term these days, because everything moves so quickly, technology changes so fast, and so forth. So once we understand that we're dealing with very short blocks of time, I suppose, then we also try and understand other behaviors, and demand behavior, occurrences usually occur with some kind of let's call it behavioral pattern attached to it. So for example, trends. We understand what a trend is. You turn on the financial news and you see what's happening with Wall Street wise, and the market's up, the market's down, the Dow is up, the Dow is down, the Nasdaq is up, and so on and so forth. So we understand all that. But is it as simple as that? Is there anything more to it? So we try and break it down. We try and decipher or decide what a trend is. Is it a positive trend? Is it a negative trend? Uh, some argument, and there's an argument among academics, some suggest that anything that's flatlined, does not have a trend. So well, others argue that, well, that's a neutral trend, whatever, your different textbooks suggest different things. So the point being, we understand positive trend, negative trend, so forth. Cycle, something that repeats. So if we were looking at demand behavior, what kind of demand behavior? Sales of turkeys, for example, for Thanksgiving, for those that celebrate that. Well, for people that celebrate Thanksgiving every November, whether you love them or hate them, a lot of people hate turkey, but For every Thanksgiving, the sales of turkeys goes up for November. Why? Because Thanksgiving, and then after that, but that happens the same spot every year. So that's kind of a cycle. It's a cyclical kind of thing. Every year at this time, this happens. Then they have seasonal patterns and so forth, which is also very much attributable to like this turkey discussion we're having. Every year this particular thing happens. And cycles, by the way, don't have to be related to dates, but it's typically, up and down movements. The market goes up 10%, it goes down 10%, it goes up 10%, and we can look at excuse me, the frequency, between those cycles. And then we have this idea of random. So it kind of looks something like this. So this would indicate a positive trend, from left to right. And on that trend, we just have some random movement. Well, that almost looks like the stock market, the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ, whatever. Cycle, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. And on this, there doesn't seem to be much of an underlying trend. Then the seasonal thing, which is really probably a more accurate representation of things like, Thanksgiving. Every year, November, we sell more turkeys, and then it's flat, and then November next year, more turkeys, so on and so forth. So that seems to be almost like this seasonal adjustment, seasonal pattern. And florists, for example, around Christmas, for those who celebrate Christmas, the colors red and white. So every year, colors red and white get more expensive around December. Every next December, more, you get the idea. And then this is that seasonal pattern with an underlying positive trend and so forth. So we try and identify these kinds of behaviors using different forecasting methods. And you can read the smaller stuff for yourself, but what we are interested in this class are moving averages, which is to include some weighting factors, weighted moving averages. The idea of exponential smoothing, which in a way is kind of a weighting factor, and we'll explain that as we go through it. And then something called the linear trend line. And again, if you took statistics and you understand linear regression, the formula is virtually identical. So when we start to talk about moving averages, well, we understand how we average things. We remember that from, our math slant arithmetic classes. So typically when we look at an average of something, it's taking some numerator and dividing it by a number. So in other words, we're summing something, in this case, summing demands, capital sigma, and D for demand. So the sum of demands of some sort, demands for cars in a given period, demands for turkeys in a given period, demands for CAT scan appointments in a particular period, whatever it happens to be, divided by, the denominator being N, or, the number of, elements and so forth. So if we were to look at the idea of a 3-period, in this case, 3-month moving average, and we saw historically that, okay, well, in January, at the end of January, we realized that we did 120, orders of, whatever it happened to be. February, we did 90. March, we did 100, so on and so forth. Well, if we wanted to forecast the next period, so we have January through October, we have the actual demand data, what actually really happened. And when do we know this? At the end of the period. So we didn't know January was going to be 120 till January 31st. Now we look back and how many did we do this month? Oh yeah, 120. We didn't know what was actually going to happen in February till when? Till the end of February. Look back and say, how many did we do in February? Oh yeah, 90, and so forth, and all the way down. But I mentioned earlier that we're trying to forecast stuff. We're trying to, not really, it's not prophecy, but for business purposes, we're trying to, take an educated guess at what we think will happen for all kinds of purposes, for purposes of inventory, for purposes of being able to capitalize a project and finance things, for purposes of delivery, for, all of this stuff, for purposes of scheduling employees. These are important things, certainly in business. And so what we try and do is we try and project or forecast what we think will happen. Is it going to happen that way? Well, I mean, I kind of doubt it, but hopefully we'll get somewhat close. And so the simplest of the techniques we're going to play with is this idea of moving average. And so what we say is, okay, so I've got demand data all the way down to October. It's now the end of October. What are we going to do in November? Well, all right. So, well, one of the techniques I can use, a qualitative, versus, I'm sorry, quantitative versus qualitative technique, is this idea of moving averages. So the argument is that we take 3 periods of previous data, sum it, meaning to add it, sum that number, and divide it by the number of periods. Well, it's a 3-period moving average, so that the numerator is the 3 most recent, data points we have, 90, 110, 130. Sum those and divide by, so our denominator is this, if it's a 3-period moving average, 3. If it's 5-period, 5, whatever we happen to use. And if we borrow the words from Robert De Niro, do the math. So if we do the math, we end up with 110 orders for November. So we would start a column. So we have a demand column here. We would start a forecast column here. And November, right about here, we would plug in 110. That's what we forecast we're going to do in November. When will we know whether that's a legitimate number or not? Well, we'll know the end of November. So this is what, if we were to follow it all the way down, these 3 periods gave us 103.3. That was our forecast. What actually happened in April, 75. We index down and take 90, 175, do the math. We end up with a forecast of 88.3. May actually, the demand number, the actual result was 110. So we can see that our forecasts are somewhat close all the way down, but again, we're projecting, we're guessing, we're forecasting. And we take the most recent 3 periods, and that's how we got to that 110. So what if we were to do 5-period moving average instead of 3-period? Well, we're using the 5 most recent data points instead of just the most recent 3. So now we're using 90 Octobers, 110 Septembers, 130 Augusts, 75 Julys, and 50 Junes. 5 periods. So again, sum to add, sum divided by number, but now it's 5 periods so that the denominator is 5. Again, in the words of Robert De Niro, do the math, we end up with 91 for November. Well, wait a minute. We just did 3-period moving average, said that our forecast for November was 110. Now we're forecasting using a 5-period moving average, and it says our forecast for November is 91. Can't fool me. Which one is right? And the answer is they're both right. They're both right, just slightly different techniques. And we'll talk more about that as we get through. So again, these were the forecasts using the technique we just mentioned and so forth. And so this is the actual demand data. This is what happens. We get a little bit of smoothing. If you notice, we're attenuating some of the noise. So we get a little bit of smoothing using a 3-period moving average, and even greater smoothing if we use 5-period moving average. And so we start to see if there is an underlying trend, almost like an ordinary least squares argument. But we're starting to see an underlying trend perhaps develop. There's another thing called weighted moving average, and this basically assigns weights. What kind of weights? Well, some kind of a weighting factor. We're doing something arguing an underlying theory of relative importance that suggests that, excuse me, we weight more recent data more heavily. We could go into all the hows and whys, but think of it this way. Would it be more reflective of what's happening in the environment, the world environment, in our ethos, if you will? Would it be more accurate to look at what's more recent because that reflects everything that's going on, or some older number? Well, the underlying argument among academics is that we weight more recent data more heavily. So when we talk about weights, typically we're looking at something between 0 and 100, perhaps 0% and 100%. And so when we look at this stuff, we say, okay, well, using that same data stuff, October is more recent than September, and the actual demand data was 90. September is more recent than August, but not as recent as October. The actual demand data was 110. August is probably the farthest out as far as aged data, and that was 130. So the underlying theory is we put more emphasis on more recent data more heavily. So for our purposes, we're just going to say that these are right now just arbitrary numbers. Some people say, well, that's random numbers. No, there's a difference between random and arbitrary. Okay, random implies some kind of a random number generator, some kind of a Monte Carlo simulation method, some kind, in other words, there's something to randomness versus just, it's like when teachers used to say, well, I'm just going to randomly choose people in the class. You're not really randomly choosing anybody. You're arbitrarily choosing someone. I'm going to pick this one over here, because if it were random, I'd have, I have 30 people in my class, so I have a random number generator from 0 to 30. I hit the button, it spins and spins, like a slot machine, and it comes out and bing, pick student 11. Well, that would be random. But if I just sit in the front of the classroom and say, well, I'm picking on Steve or I'm picking on Keisha, these are arbitrary picks. So in a sense, for our purposes, we're just choosing arbitrary weights, except that the total of our weights must equal 100%. And we weight more recent data more heavily. So we're going to put 50%, if you will, of our emphasis on October's data number, 33% of our emphasis or weight on September's number, and only 17% on August's number. And again, these were actual data numbers, and what are we trying to do? We're still trying to forecast that next period, still trying to forecast November. So when we, again, do the math, and the formula is a 3-period weighted moving average, excuse me, is the sum of the weights times the demands, the weights times the demands, the weights times the demands, the weights times the demands. So again, do the math, 50% times 90, and we got that from here. 33% times 110, we got that from here. 17% times 130, we got that from here. And when we do the arithmetic, we end up with 103.4 orders as our forecast for November. Now, it's kind of like you guys won't remember who Yosemite Sam was. We had some pretty cool cartoons when I was a kid, but we probably also had covered wagons and horses and stuff like that too, so whatever. But the Yosemite Sam moment is kind of like, say, wait a minute. That light bulb thing. We had 110, 3-period moving average. We had 91, 5-period moving average. Now we have 103.4, 3-period weighted moving average. Which one is right? They're all right. That's the ever-loving point. Different technique, different result, but they're all correct, just using a different technique. All right, we will get into exponential smoothing in another Zoom session. I'm going to try and post these. I've recorded this. Hopefully it will be tolerable, and hopefully I'll be able to make it available to you, and I guess we'll figure that out. But only Andy joined us this evening. So to the rest of you and to Andy, have a wonderful weekend. And, obviously Friday at 6 is not something, remember, I asked, what days could we meet? Because this is helpful to you. I mean, I know this stuff already. So I would like you guys to get, excuse me, get back to me and pick a date and time that you think works better, because I'm trying to accommodate the group just as a matter of convenience. And if we can't do that, then hopefully I can make the recordings of these available to you, and you can play them and so on and so forth. So anyway, it's Friday, May 20th. It is now about 6:40. Have a great evening. Enjoy your weekend. Look at the contents section. Follow the syllabus. You're being tasked to look over the forecasting elements, and that's what I just went over. So review this stuff. Don't forget to do the pretest that is attached to the syllabus and email that to me. And we will continue this perhaps over the weekend. I'll try and record another one and so forth. So have a great evening, and we'll see you all soon. I'm going to stop share and end the session. Enjoy your weekend.